I may as well say that this is probably going to be a canter, perhaps a gallop, through a lot of unrelated or not necessarily related items about this songmaker, his contexts, and also, for that matter, the way in which he was viewed at the time. But I'm anxious to get through it. And the matter is that if I don't get through it, it doesn't matter because it's all in the handouts. Still, I am handouts into the chat. I am very, yes, the handouts are actually available slightly differently on the website for the conference or thereabouts. Harry may specify that. However, today's challenge is not to carefully fold and cut the sheets. That will distract you all from what I'm about to say. And instead, at the end, you'll receive written instructions as to how to do it. But anyway, I want to start with 20th century memory, which is what we ourselves know best and filter everything else through. First is the redoubtable Frank McPeak.
Not hearing it, sorry.
That's the only example.
Excuse me, John. They're just not hearing it online, so I'm just gonna fix that setting. I beg your pardon. That's really sorry to interrupt.
Right.
Okay.
Notice then, as you heard the song, the ornate wording and the internal rhyming, which we associate with Irish language song. He didn't name an author, but about 15 years later or so, John McGrath, from about 5 or 6 miles away in County Derry, sang it in this way.
I'll speak in candour of a night in slumber, my mind did wander near to Athlone, to the centre station of an Irish nation, where a congregation unto me was shown. Because people in the room can't hear that, I'm just going to cut it short. But hearing it now, John. But his
the icon on the right of your thing should point on the right there, John. You have to.
Sorry, on the right.
That one up the top. Yeah.
Well, that may. Let's go again then. No.
I'll speak in candour of a night in slumber.
Sorry.
My mind did wander near to Athlone, to the centre station of an Irish nation, where a congregation unto me was shown. Beyond my counting upon a mountain, close to a fountain that clearly ran, there seemed to tremble, I'll not dissemble, as they assemble for the rights of man. All clad in green there right.
At the same time, John McGrath told Glenn that it had been written by a man called John Sheil or Sheil from Portadown. When around the same time, in around 1975, young singers visited older singers in Drogheda, they were told of a John Sheil, a songmaker, who was also known as Sheil the Poet or Little Sheil, and he was credited with the writing of the songs which are named there, many of which will be known to you. Clearly Greenmount's Smiling Anne and the Star of Slane, Hannah Healy, the Pride of Hoath, are commonly enough sung. Only two of the songs which were named by them fit the seditious description that Frank McPeak gave them. But if we look at 20th and 19th century authorities and their press, we see that in fact sedition was very much on their mind. In the National Archives of Ireland is a new song, a ballad, sheets called The Ballad of Muff, which was confiscated from two singers, George and Mary Faulkner, at Carrickmacross in 1830. And this song they had bought from Patrick Kelly, a printer who lives in the West Street in the town of Drogheda. This is the report a month earlier of the actual Battle of Muff, or a report rather. There were many such. It was simply a sectarian collision in which a desperate and sanguinary fight took place at Muff on Thursday evening. 6 of the Roman Catholic party were left dead on the fair green. This is in the National Archives, the original affidavit of George and Mary Faulkner, telling and implicating Patrick Kelly, the printer of Drogheda. However, also in Drogheda, in the Drogheda Conservative Journal, the 28th of October, 1837, they have the first, apparently, number 1, set of articles on Irish political ballads. And they choose to vilify a particular set. The ballads from which we take the following extracts is styled a collection of patriotic and national songs. These treasonable compositions are extensively circulated through the counties of Meath, Louth, Monaghan, Cavan, etc. Thousands and tens of thousands of copies of them are annually printed and are not only sold to itinerant vendors, but publicly exhibited for sale in shops styled liberal. They have 3 more articles which variously vilify not merely the publications, but the Argus, their rival newspaper. These poems have been published and sold at the Argus, and they refer to these books regularly stitched in 13 or 14 volumes, reprinted annually. Similarly, the 4th of the articles refers particularly to Sheil's collection of patriotic and national songs, volume 12, and again implicate the Argus. And who was the editor and proprietor of the Argus? Nobody except the ballad monger Patrick Kelly, whom we've already heard of. But no copy of the volume which is described in this article is known. I've looked in every library pretty well. And again, they quote, and this is lovely. He thought he saw Billy, that is King Billy, the prince of the robbing clan, broiled like a herring stretched out in the frying pan. Harry and Bess, old Cromwell, that holy man, swimming and diving all through the fierce flames. With Luther and Calvin, John Knox and his satellites, thousands of records and millions of Williamites, barrels of Brunswickers and hogsheads of orange fights, scorching on embers and fettered in chains. And there's a lot like that, and we've been hearing about unsuitable songs, haven't we? So, but at various times, the Drogheda Press represents Sheil as a hero in that he was in the first of these at the left-hand side, representing people as needing a revision of the Corn Laws, but at the second, again, the Drogheda Journal vilifies Sheil's Bob Latatats when such productions have been publicly sold at the Argus office. And the newspaper is obviously very incensed by these over the years 1837 and 38. Again, rather later, 1840, a Reverend Godkin came into Drogheda and attempted to convert the people by lecturing on the iniquities of popery. And when doing so, the newspaper reported was frequently interrupted by a man called Quinn, a poorly looking weaver, seconded by a low fellow of the name of Sheil. On the following day, Quinn, Sheil and Co. placarded the walls of every part of the town, announcing a discussion to be held in the courthouse that evening. And they didn't ask Mr. Godkin if they could do so or thereabouts. But this is an example of the kind of reaction to popular ballads which was going on in one town and by extension almost everywhere in Ireland. But I want now to turn to libraries and librarians and what they might know of this Sheil. Firstly, Dennis J. O'Donoghue in Poets of Ireland. And he gives it as Richard Sheil, says that he wrote Bellews Till Hill, repeal meeting at Tara, confused with John Day, a weaver, not a printer. And then he goes to John Day, wrote The Start of Slane, Bellews Town Hill, the repeal meeting at Tara, but the first two he seems not to have written. And then John Costello is credited with other songs of the same name, and he was editor of the Drogheda Argus from 1861 and wrote Bellews Town Hill. So you can see that there's a degree of confusion among the librarians and also in the library, because Sheil's Shamrock, a set of books in the National Library of Ireland, are credited to Richard Lalor Shiels, who was an Irish politician of around the same time. I've since had this corrected in the catalogue, and they are now credited to John Sheil of Drogheda. This is their extant collection. Similarly, in Drogheda and Dublin, there are some in Trinity, some in Dublin City Library, some in the Royal Irish Academy, some in an unknown place, which appear to be the volumes which are missing from the National Library, some in Belfast Public Library, and no other library has in the world. It doesn't show in Copac, but WorldCat shows that there's a single volume of volume 8 in Chicago. But the newspaper said there were thousands printed annually. Where did they all go? And that's something of a mystery, because when we look at it, we see that of Sheil's Shamrock, which is the political songs, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 11, 14 are actually available. 5 and 6 may have been in the National Library at some time. And of another set called Sheil's Love Songs, that is the bulk of the ones sung by the Drogheda singers, Sheil's Love Songs, only 1, 2, 4, 7 and 9 are extant. And where the dickens did they go to? Mind you, it's very hard to find them because I was in Dublin City Library yesterday, and where I thought they had 2 volumes, sorry, 1 volume, they produced 3. So it's like that. But who, what, how many? But the one thing which I come back to is that the Drogheda singers were absolutely unequivocal, and they referred to little books. This was John Sheil, or John Sheil as they called him, John Sheil as we might say, Sheil the poet, and he was the man. And he was absolutely revered locally by those who had heard of him. The unfortunate thing is that together with librarians, bibliographers also compound or reduce the confusion, because George Denis Zimmerman in his bibliography says that there are 12 volumes of Sheil's love songs and 14. I can only find up to number 9 of Sheil's love songs, although the final volume 14 of Shamrock is around. However, the people who have been reducing the confusion are the enthusiasts, people whose names we all know: Len Graham, Sean Corcoran, Jerry Cullen, and others. They have looked at Sheil books, newspapers, ballad sheets, and others doing local history like Sean Faulkner and Brendan Matthews have looked in all the possible places, certainly in Ireland. British Library doesn't have any, Cambridge doesn't have any. So what I am presenting is actually these people's work, not just mine, but these people's work. I've maybe systematized it a bit because that's the way I do things, but this is a huge cooperative project, as all of this kind of research, to my mind, needs to be. Now, a reminder of the National Archives of September 1830 with the Battle of Muff. You see that I have highlighted the woodcut, a parrot in a tree inside a lozenge. It's actually an octagon, but it's a sort of lozenge shape, printed by Kelly, the printer. Similarly, a year later, more, printed by Patrick Kelly in West Street of Drogheda in the National Archives of Ireland catalogue. This, by the way, the panel on the left-hand side is part of a new project whereby it is possible to see, certainly up to 1833, any mention of the word ballad in the abstract from a document in the National Archives. This is a new feature with the National Archives and is enormously searchable. I found stuff I didn't know was there, and I had looked, Maura Murphy had looked, and various others. So this is a hugely important small piece of resource in progress up to 1833. And then in 1831, there's another set of ballads confiscated in places around Dundalk, Drogheda, Carrickmacross, sold by Patrick Kelly, but some of them seem to have been printed in Dublin, some of them seem to have been printed by Drogheda, but they have woodcuts. And I want to illustrate this in the same way. Another set, Patrick Kelly, West Street. Now, this is a Dublin print. This was printed by Kelly. Note the woodcut, and note the woodcut. Printed Drogheda, what's it doing on a Dublin printed sheet? And of course, again, the Ballad of Muff, and we have 2 lions, both printed by Kelly, and this characteristic octagonal lozenge. And I think that it implies that Kelly sometimes falsified his imprint, perhaps to disassociate himself from the material. The Land St. Patrick Blessed was written definitely by John Sheil. Now, Sheil's love songs and Sheil's songbooks. This is Sheil's Shamrock, showing the full text of the rights of man as abstracted by Len Graham. Librarians were sometimes, when we looked at the books, were sometimes concerned more about their condition and their value as objects. And Len had to smuggle a razor blade in order to cut the pages and get access to the text. I, at one stage, had to make strong representation to librarians about actually cutting pages as if these were not research objects and instead to be valued simply. But we're winning. At the moment, it's 2.5 to researchers and only 0.5 to librarians. This is their appearance. The two which were, well, there were 2 volumes of love songs printed in Drogheda, 1 and 2. But as you can see, slightly different covers, SHIEL and SHEIL. Dublin, the printing is Sheil characteristically. The dates are quite various. This is about 1834. And you see that that's the Dublin printed 1846, but inside that particular volume in Belfast, although the picture is of a Dublin National Library of Ireland copy, is 1834. So there's evidence of combination of stuff. And these are the titles of the love songs. The Pride of Bewley, The Hero of Donore, Lucy Lynch of Lurgan Green, The Beauty of Screen, and so on. Quite elaborate titles and wording, giving a title, a person and place, giving tune directions, echoing Gaelic poetry. I'm a poor simple maid that's in sad tormentation, and love is the cause of my pain. For the sake of a hero, I pine in vexation. Sly Cupid, my poor heart has slain. Lovely stuff. But patterns, their internal rhyme, elaborate wording, highly accomplished poetically, but some not. Tune directions include Bawdry and Orange songs and some Scottish tune names. The place names indicate a hinterland with a few excursions to Carlow and Kilkenny, Armagh and Tyrone. They radiated from Drogheda north to Dundalk, northwest into Monaghan and the Boyne Valley, and into Meath and southwards into Fingal, and so on. No other writer of his kind shows these characteristics, equivalent poetic skill, or is anywhere near as prolific. Perhaps 360 songs in the total of 26 books. The ballads and the small songbooks appear to have had nothing new, but the quality is very varied. However, his life, which I have reproduced in the booklets, is given in the Drogheda Argus of the 6th of July. And at least one of his songs does make it clear that he was born in County Armagh in the county of Lurgan and Portadown. So John McGrath's father's memory has been vindicated. Now, more of his life is in my small books. He was active, and there's a lot of newspaper reference, which I do give. More in articles written by Sean Corcoran or about singing events at Drogheda. But his importance is that he locally sustained singing tradition. Nationally, his songs are enormously singable, and culturally, he's a very important crossover poet. Internationally, he has been recognized because John Holloway, the professor of English in Cambridge, talked of ballad sheets, or certain of them, in articles in The Listener in the 1970s, as being the best English-Irish poetry before Yeats. And he said that the fall from them to Davis and Mangan was simply catastrophic. So I borrowed his title and applied it generally to Irish metrical verse in English between 1780. And I argue that John Sheil was perhaps the best English-Irish poet before Yeats. These are the 3 articles in the Listener of June 1970. This is the article, this is the chapter in which I elaborate my ideas. It's forthcoming, but this is what John Holloway said. To my mind, the number of these ballads, and their often superlative quality, sets them among the very first achievements of Anglo-Irish literature as a whole. The decline from the best of them, you'll have noticed that I've not used the familiar classic ones like Molly Bawn or The Night Before Larry Was Stretched, to the verse of Thomas Davis or James Clarence Mangan was simply catastrophic. These Irish ballads taken together are the best English-Irish poetry before Yeats, and that's all you can say. And I conjectured at the end of my article, my chapter, might John Sheil, this obscure vernacular poet, a weaver by trade and thus only a part-time hack, though among the people a poet of legend, who combined mastery of form and vocabulary with wit and verve, the legatee of an 18th century style, who probably produced one of the masterpieces of English language verse in Ireland, which constituted for him a rare but not unexpected excursion into Broadry, The Cuckoo's Nest. Might he just be the best English-Irish poet before Yeats? But I thought I should qualify that. In the past, this song tradition has been alternately condemned as banal, indecent, and as marred by its flowery language and non-standard syntax. It is well past time that students of literature, other than the few enthusiasts, began to take the sort of material I have here superficially examined much more seriously. It might then be seen without the taint of class, pedantry, or puritanism as it is, as having qualities that educated verse could never have attained. I've got this on some of it on my website, the slides, and I want to thank you. And these are the directions for folding the booklets. And this is a comment about, they actually imitate the Dublin series in size and in the use of assorted type sizes and faces, but they do actually have only about a quarter the number of pages. And it gives you an idea of just how even the poorest quality printer in those 19th century days could tackle a job of setting 32 pages and making them make sense when you folded them to be coherent. But anyway, there are the pages with the title page outside, fold vertically in landscape, horizontally as you are, and then fold that and spot your uncle. Sorry, Steve. That was a gallop, but it also overran.
No, that's splendid. We've got time, but I'd like to apologise for librarians.
I'm sorry, saving your presence, Steve.
Yes, that's right. But I have to say that I used to do this at Croydon Library. I would always cut the tops of the pages if they were, and I was hauled over the coals by a bibliographer who said that's evidence of how it was printed and how, you know, of this as an artifact, and he told me off for doing it. But I carried on anyway because I'm a reader. It's the reader that matters. Anyway.
Librarians don't get their page back.
Yes.
Yes, actually, we know very well how the little 8-page songbooks were built up, because there's one in the National Archives that has on its extreme edge enough print to establish what was printed beside this one was another copy the same, but the other set of pages. They were printed so that the printer could take the page which had been impressed, turn it over, and impose it again. half sheet imposition or work and turn. And it produced 2 copies of the same book from the same set of 8 little pages. It can be fascinating, which is why I do this kind of thing, because I love seeing how it can be done.
Hey, John, any questions in the room apart from how to make up a little chapter from your own?
It was a gallop, I'm sorry.
No, it was great. It was really good. And I hope we can read a printed version of it in the Ballad Partners next week. Any questions online?
Sorry, blinded you all, did I?
It seemed to me that John Sheil didn't even know how to spell his own name. I mean, it was on his own little booklets, it was spelled with an EI and an IE.
That wasn't the writer, that was the printer.
That's the printer.
Yeah.
The compositor.
If the librarian's not to blame, then the printer has to be.
Any more? We're all waiting for their coffee, which is what we're going to now. But thank you very much, John.
Thank you.